becomes, swampy lowlands breaking into the higher ground altogether there. Because teachers are professionals, and if we provide a description of what we're doing followed and accompanied with an explanation that's grounded through several lenses and rigorous, then we can generate a theory that's personal, a personal educational theory from our practice. And we can make a claim to knowledge. I know now how to, and it's real for now. With next year's cohort of pupils, it may have to change and be tweaked. So my knowledge is ever evolving. It's critically reflected. It's not for sissies or wimps, as we said yesterday. It's not a flabby armchair activity. Critical reflection is very tough. It's like meditation, to try and clear your mind, get rid of all that internal dialogue and say, what am I trying to actually focus on here? What am I trying to bring to the surface here? And it's tough. It's not just driving home from school in the car and saying, actually, yeah, that went fine. This is deeper. This is a more rigorous process. So it's an in-depth reflection, evaluating practice, and taking action to improve the practice. It involves you then, as obviously you're a teacher, but involves you as a learner about your own practice. So it's liberating in that sense. You can also find it very painful because it can throw up aspects of practice that you're not that happy with. But now you know them, you can do something about them. Other times you could be wandering away blindly, unaware of the damage you're doing. So the whole process invites you to become a learner, a researcher, a theorist, there. So you're straight away getting agency and autonomy around your practice. And we're now claiming this can lead to a sense of well-being without learning about well-being as a separate entity. We are doing it. So we begin, as we said, for those who were here yesterday, but now for the newcomers, we identify our values. That's hard. What are the values we hold? It took me ages to try and bring them up to the surface and articulate them and write them down. And we ask ourselves also if these values are worth having. Hitler had values, he held them up for public scrutiny, he wrote them in Mein Kampf. That doesn't make them legit. So we follow Jack Whitehead's rule on this. We say, are they for the common good? Are they life-affirming? And are they sustainable? And if we then present them to others and say, these are the values I hold, these are what I am trying to do, and we get asked the hard questions here. Well, how do you know that's going to be good for the students? What will the students' experience of you living to this value? What will that be like for them? So you're not on a white horse with a lance, being a knight, trying to impose your values on somebody. And we ask ourselves, are we living these in practice, and if it's worth trying to live these in practice? And this involves, as I said, very hard work. So we're plugging for the book, where we really should be on the Late Show as well. It involves critical thinking, and that's a key aspect. And critical thinking is not just being criticising, it's looking at something from all points of view and making up your own informed mind about it. And Taylor and White suggest that we problematise, and this is drawing on the work of Freire, that we problematise our work and we interrogate previously taken for granted assumptions. And we question, and we're aiming towards praxis, again drawing on the Freirean work. It's critically informed action. There's a moral and ethical dimension to this. So Sean reminds us as well that we're not looking for closure and answers, really. Our research is certainly not aiming to be a victory narrative of any kind. We're looking for some further understanding, and that may throw up a whole new round of questions that we didn't anticipate at the beginning, and now we have to go critically reflecting as to where we pursue this again, because classrooms are organic, messy places. We can't just proceed nicely from A to B to C to D. That's not what happens. As anybody here who's a teacher knows, something will happen that maybe I'm trying to research maybe the role of what I'm giving in homework. Now I might find there's a child here who's going back to a chaotic home, doesn't have the internet, the library nearby has closed down. This child can't do the homework that I'm. So this needs, a look at a socio-political context here. So we're into a whole new layer of reading and trying to dig deep and trying to come to terms with this. So you can't just proceed again on your white horse. And Brookfield talks about critical reflection entailing all kinds of risks and complexities, and he said there really would have to be some compelling reason why you would want to do this. And he's updated that now. He's a 2017 book that I haven't actually got a copy of, but Maureen has. And it's pretty much in line with his 95 with some new stuff that I'm down to read. And he says it's enlightenment often at the cost of pain, and we have all discovered this. You know, where people have videoed us and we thought we were brilliant. Choosing to become critically reflective will only happen then if we see it is in our best interest, that this is something that will improve us, improve our practice. And by default, what happens for the children, because they're at the core of all of this. It's not just about me improving my career as a teacher. This is all about the children's learning, and they have to be core and central to the process. So when we neglect to clarify our questions and our assumptions, and when we fail to research our practice, maybe we have this sense that the world is governed by chaos and that it's all a matter of luck what happens. So we need to, Brookfield talks about the benefits of critical reflection, and the first two are all about providing a rationale for practice. Being able to stand up to the Kigra or the inspector or to the parents or to the principal and say, well, this is why I'm working this way. And be able to give, because I've critically reflected on this, I'm not just doing an ad hoc whimmy sort of thing. He also talks about the second pair of benefits about avoiding self-laceration. When you've given your all and it hasn't been enough for some child, you have to say, this is a bigger problem, this may be a team approach, so that we don't beat ourselves up, because we've critically reflected and said, I have done what I can for this child. And the last pair of benefits are to do with creating lively and democratic spaces in our classroom. And I think those 6 benefits are fantastic comforts for anybody wondering should they bother. So that leads us into values. And, I could ask you, well, what values do you hold about education in general and teaching in particular? And we say education is never neutral. Even people who talk about objective, clinical, scientific research, they're coming with a value about that. They value that. So it's not neutral. And we all hold values, but we may not have articulated them even to ourselves. So examining our values is core and central to becoming a critically reflective practitioner. The methodological, the way we work in terms of teaching in our classrooms or researching, how I see myself in the world and in my relationship with others, and how I view the other, and the other set, that the ontological views. The other set then is how I view knowledge and all that is to do with knowledge acquisition, generation, creation, and who I think is a knower in the class and who says. Both of those sets of values are going to inform how I work with the children. So to take a caricature, if I see the child as the child will be enabled to, or the pupil will be enabled to, an abstract other, I'm not that worried about differentiation if I do that, because I'm adhering to the guidelines, but it's all right. And if I see knowledge as a product that can be transmitted from me into the empty vessel, then I am going to talk at and down to the children, and I'm going to do kind of chalk and talk teaching, direct didactic teaching, which there's need for every now and again. But if I see the other is equal to myself and deserving of respect, fuzzy, dreamy, goofy, scientific, actor, politician, and budding politician in the class, if I see them as human beings in their totality as a unique person that deserves my respect, I'm going to be different. I'm going to talk with them. And if I'm researching people, with people, not doing research on people. So these values really affect how I am in the classroom and how I am as a researcher. And I also see that when I finish my action research in line with this, it's never finished. It's just a stop, a photograph. It's ongoing because my knowledge is ever evolving. So back to me, my concern about my practice was rooted in my values. I valued classroom discussion, dialogical pedagogy, active learning, inquiry-based pedagogy. And these values were kind of grounded in larger terms, I suppose, larger concepts of care and emancipation and social justice. But when I left Carysford back in the dim and distant days when we had only an NT qualification followed by 2 years probation, I was given a very large class of 57 junior and senior infants. And I was told it's only until Halloween because we've applied for another teacher. And can you imagine giving 57 children a minute each to talk? We've been there, only had 40. Now, you can imagine the kind of classroom practice with 40 small children. It's control and domination. It's monologic, right? It's certainly, and I knew at some intuitive, inchoate sense in here that this is wrong. It was wrong. It was unfair on me. It was unfair on the kids, but I didn't have a language. That's why I really worry about colleges of education taking out foundations, because you take out foundations, if you take out philosophy, sociology, and psychology, you take out the language of critique, and you take out that ability to question what's going on in your educational context. So as an NQT, I dominated, totally dominated, and I was happy. I had a quiet classroom, no one died, no one lost an eye, the milk didn't get spilled. They all lined up, all the coats were on them in the evening, and they got the right school bag. And the principal was very happy. She said, "You're doing a grand job, stop worrying. You know, there's no one dying." Shouldn't be me. But it wasn't right. I'm caricaturing now, but it was that kind of a conversation. And I wanted a more dialogical form, but I didn't know that. I knew I was living as contradiction. And I wanted to see, anyway, they became the living standards of judgment. So I said, eventually, after about 2 decades of teaching, if I hold a value about dialogue, and I want the children to talk more in class, that's a criterion now. Then the standard of judgment that I will use for my research here is, do I allow the children to talk more in class? Where am I going to gather data where they're talking more in class? It's that complex and that simple, you know? So that was, you know, I was unhappy about my teaching, my classroom was monologic, and that's no problem to me. I could talk for Ireland, universe and beyond, but wasn't fair to the kids. And that didactic teaching style didn't encourage those children to think critically, certainly. I didn't even know what critical thinking was, to be honest.